You will not believe what happens to the girl at the end. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can continue writing stories like this one. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.
A shadow over Havenwood. It began with Myra, Thomason's youngest, usually a dynamo of laughter and bruised shins. Now, she was a still, small form, her cheeks ablaze against the stark white of her bedding. Thomason dabbed at her forehead with a damp cloth, fruitlessly battling the mounting fever. By dusk, Myra was lost in fevered visions, whispering of phantoms flitting across the ceiling. Then came Hemlock, the town elder, discovered slumped before his cold hearth, his breathing a strained rasp. A creeping inertia soon blanketed Havenwood, the once vibrant market square. A symphony of bartering and gossip fell deathly quiet. Doors remained bolted, windows like vacant eyes staring out. The air, formerly redolent with wood smoke and the yeasty promise of fresh bread, now held a sharp, coppery taste, the scent of burgeoning dread. Mayor Silas, whose chins habitually jiggled with mirth, was etched with a permanent scowl. He summoned the council, his pronouncements weighed down by unease. "It's accelerating," he stated, pacing before their disquieted faces. "Beyond our comprehension. We must isolate its source, contain the spread." Uneasy murmurs arose like the rustle of dry leaves before a storm breaks. The name on everyone's tongue, Ilara. Ilara, the widowed recluse residing beside the whispering woods, whose command of herbs and healing bordered, some whispered, on the arcane. Her concoctions were highly prized, her touch gentle, but her solitary existence, an uncanny bond with the forest, rendered her vulnerable to suspicion. Thomason overheard the hushed speculations while purchasing tapers at the mercantile. "Did you observe the draught she prescribed for Martha's cough?" Agnes, the baker's spouse, hissed to Bess. "Martha's hacking is only intensified." A prickle of guilt tormented Thomason. She had employed Ilara's bombs for Myra's childhood mishaps, sought her counsel on brewing infusions to soothe her own jangled nerves. Had she unwittingly unleashed this affliction upon her own flesh and blood? Later that night, Thomason felt compelled to approach Ilara's humble abode. Lamplight spilled from the windows, etching elongated, wavering forms onto the surrounding trees. She faltered, her knuckles hovering inches from the weathered wood of the door. It swung inward before she could knock. Ilara's eyes, usually lively and inviting, were steeped in fatigue. "Thomason," she greeted softly, her voice a calming balm. "What brings you here, child?" Tears stung Thomason's eyes. "They're pointing fingers, Ilara. Blaming you for this plague. Accusing you of witchcraft." Ilara's expression tightened, a brief flash of anguish flickering across her features. "I'm aware," she responded quietly. "Fear incites such pronouncements. But it isn't the truth, is it?" Thomason implored, her voice shaking. Ilara held her gaze, unwavering. "I would never intentionally cause harm to this village, Thomason. My only desire has been to offer aid." But Thomason's conviction wavered, fractured by terror for her little girl. The seed of uncertainty had been planted and its roots were already burrowing deep. The following morning, Mayor Silas addressed the assembled villagers, his voice echoing across the square. "We have investigated these events," he proclaimed, and consulted Elder Hemmings. Hemmings, a feeble, ancient figure with clouded eyes, nodded with gravity. "The origin of this malady has been identified." He paused for effect, his gaze sweeping across the anxious throng. "Ilara, the widow. Her practices are unconventional. Her wisdom perilous." A unified gasp arose from the crowd. All eyes pivoted towards Ilara, who stood at the periphery, her face ashen but defiant. "This is utter lunacy," Ilara exclaimed, her voice ringing with disbelief. "I have been a resident of Havenwood for 2 decades. I have mended your wounds, comforted your sorrows. How can you level such accusations against me?" "We lack concrete evidence," Silas conceded, his voice hardening, "but the convergence of events is too pronounced to disregard. We cannot jeopardize the well-being of the village. For the greater good of Havenwood, Ilara, you are banished." "Banished?" Ilara echoed, her voice barely audible. "Where would I possibly go?" "That is of no concern to us," Silas retorted, his face grim. "You have until nightfall." A murmur of discomfort rippled through the throng. Some averted their eyes, consumed by shame. Others glared at Ilara with undisguised animosity. Thomason stood paralyzed, her heart hammering against her ribs. She longed to speak, to champion Ilara, but fear constricted her throat, stealing her voice. As the sun began its descent, casting elongated, ominous shadows across the hamlet, Ilara emerged from her cottage. A small knapsack was secured over her shoulder, her face a map of despair. She traversed the hushed streets, her eyes searching the faces of those who had once been her neighbors, her confidants. Not a single soul met her gaze. Reaching the boundary of Havenwood, she turned back, her voice laced with a desperate plea. "You are committing a grave error," she cried out. "A catastrophic mistake. This illness is not of my making. You will lament this day." Silas advanced a step, his features impassive. "Leave this place, Alara," he commanded harshly, "and never return." With one last, heartbroken glance at the village that had once been her sanctuary, Alara turned and melted into the encroaching shadows of the woods, leaving Havenwood to wallow in its fear and meet its fate. Thomasin watched her departure, a sob catching in her throat. Myra remained in the throes of the illness. The village lay eerily still, and she understood with a chilling certainty that they had condemned an innocent woman, and perhaps in doing so they had sealed their own doom. Whispers in the woods. Branches snagged at Alara's cloak like grasping talons, each pull a silent directive deeper into the verdant gloom. Havenwood's sounds dwindled, overwhelmed by the susurrus of the trees, a tongue she'd once deciphered but now found taunting. The pack digging into her back, filled with scant herbs and a threadbare blanket, seemed to grow heavier with each stride, a leaden weight mirroring the guilt and fear that festered within. She hadn't risked a backward glance when they'd forced her to the forest's edge. Thomasin's mournful face, reflecting Alara's own despair, seared her memory. A soundless plea, perhaps, or an emblem of their shared powerlessness. The path, once a comfort, surrendered to a riot of ground cover. Alara faltered, her boots sinking into the spongy soil. The sickness plaguing Havenwood had infiltrated her blood, leaving her weakened and unsteady. The forest floor swayed beneath her gaze, fractured by deceptive sunlight. She halted, bracing herself against a weathered oak, its rough bark a harsh caress. Closing her eyes, she pictured her humble dwelling, the comforting fragrance of chamomile and lavender permeating the air. Samuel, her husband, stood by the fire, his laughter resonating within the small space. He'd understood the wood's language, the secrets murmured on the breeze. He'd shown her how to listen, how to mend, how to find peace in solitude. But Samuel was gone, claimed by a winter chill 3 years before, leaving her alone with her remedies and recollections. Now, even those memories soured, tainted by the accusations hurled against her. Witch? The word clung to her like damp tendrils, suffocating her spirit. She pressed forward, propelled by a raw instinct for survival, though a part of her longed for swift oblivion. Every step became a contest against her failing strength, against the encroaching darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. The forest, once a refuge, now felt like a cage, its borders shifting and uncertain. The sun descended, painting long, grotesque shadows that writhed around her like restless phantoms. She was lost, utterly adrift. Panic constricted her throat, stealing her breath. Water. She needed water. Her mouth felt like sandpaper, her tongue thick and useless. Driven by desperation, she strayed from the nearly invisible trail, battling through a bramble thicket. Thorns ripped at her cloak, drawing tiny droplets of blood that mingled with the sweat beading on her forehead. Finally, she emerged into a small clearing, a creek shimmering like quicksilver in the fading light. She lowered herself to the edge, her limbs trembling uncontrollably. She cupped her hands and drank deeply, the cool liquid offering a temporary solace. But the respite was brief. The fever consumed her, turning her veins to molten fire. As night blanketed the forest, Alara collapsed beside the stream, her body racked with shivers. The bundle at her back offered scant comfort as a pillow. She gazed up at the canopy of leaves, their shapes blurring and distorting in the darkness. The whispers of the woods intensified, coalescing into a discordant chorus of condemnation. She shut her eyes, tears tracing paths down her face. The image of Thomasin's daughter, pallid and burning with fever, invaded her thoughts. Had she failed them? Had her knowledge, her abilities, been inadequate? A choked sob escaped her, a sound swallowed by the immensity of the forest. She was alone, forsaken, left to perish. The ember of hope that had flickered within, the belief she could somehow prove her innocence, extinguished, leaving a desolate ache. The final thing she registered before oblivion claimed her was a solitary star, a minute spark of light in the inky expanse. Was it a promise of salvation, or merely a cruel reminder of what she had lost? She neither knew nor cared. She only wished for the suffering to cease. The Cherokee warrior, the forest stilled. Sunlight, sieved through the thick emerald roof, splashed the woodland floor in fluid, shifting patterns as Ketua navigated the undergrowth, his movements as fluid and unobtrusive as a wraith. His destination was the trading post bordering the white settlements, his pack laden with pelts and painstakingly woven baskets. This trek represented more than mere commerce. It was a delicate diplomatic minuet, a fragile span connecting two cultures riddled with misunderstanding. The aspirations of his kin weighed heavily upon him, his hope to negotiate just prices and preserve harmony fueling each step. He paused by a stream, the air noticeably cooler, pregnant with the earthy tang of moist soil and decaying foliage. He scooped water into his palm and drank, relishing its pristine clarity. That's when he noticed her. A wan figure lay prostrate near the bank, nearly engulfed by the verdant growth. Approach became a cautious exercise, his hand instinctively drifting toward the knife at his side. However, proximity revealed the subtle cadence of her breathing, faint but insistent. She lived. He knelt, his discerning gaze conducting a swift assessment. Her skin burned, a furnace of heat, yet her extremities shivered. Her clothes, roughly spun, were unfamiliar, alien to any garment he'd seen amongst his own people. Fever and depletion were evident, the unmistakable hallmarks of one lost and struggling against the odds. He reached to gauge the heat radiating from her brow. His survey of the vicinity revealed no sign of a struggle nor any other tracks. Utterly alone. Abandoned, perhaps? The thought snagged at his conscience. To leave her meant certain death. Ketua, a warrior and leader, also possessed the wisdom of a healer steeped in the forest's ancient lore. He held the secrets whispered by plants, the curative strength of roots and leaves, the melodies that could mend a wounded spirit. His decision solidified. He would render aid. Reducing her fever took priority. He carefully rolled her onto her back, mindful of her fragility. Her face was thin, her lips parched. He delved into his pack, retrieving a small deerskin pouch containing dried herbs gathered from the mountain's flank. He selected a portion of willow bark well known for its antipyretic qualities. He masticated the bark into a damp mass, mixing it with water from the creek, creating a bitter poultice. Gently he parted her lips and placed a small measure of the paste upon her tongue. She swallowed reflexively, her eyelids flickering. Next, he sought to alleviate her burning temperature. Soaking a corner of his own tunic in the cool stream, he carefully sponged her face and neck, the water a welcome counterpoint to her fevered skin. He repeated the process, moving to her arms and legs. As he ministered to her, he observed the dark smudges beneath her eyes, the haunted echo that clung to her even in unconsciousness. What trials had she faced, what sorrows had driven her to such desolation? He detected a tremor of fear flicker across her countenance. He gathered fallen branches, choosing only those dry enough to ignite readily. He kindled a small fire some distance away, its warmth reaching her without being oppressive. The smoke spiraled skyward, carrying the scent of burning wood mingling with the subtle perfume of the herbs. He sat vigil, monitoring her condition, his senses sharpened. The sun began its descent, splashing the firmament with vibrant hues of coral and amethyst. The forest stirred with the voices of the night creatures, the mournful calls of owls, the rustling whispers of the undergrowth. As deeper shadows encroached, he fed the fire, the flames painting her features with dancing light. He knew he couldn't remain here indefinitely. Duty called him towards his mission, his obligations to his people. Yet, abandonment was unthinkable. He leaned close, listening to the shallowness of her breath. Again, he touched her forehead, registering a slight cooling. The herbs were taking effect. Still feeble, still feverish, she nevertheless clung to life. He would remain through the watches of the night, shielding her from the forest's perils. In the morning, he would determine their next course of action. With an unwavering certainty, he felt their destinies now intertwined. The Great Spirit had orchestrated their meeting for a purpose. A bridge of cultures. The first few days were a blur of delirium for Alara. She tasted broth, felt cool cloths on her forehead, and heard a low, soothing voice that spoke in unfamiliar cadences. Sometimes she surfaced enough to see a dark, concerned face, the face of the man who had found her. Ketua. He tended to her with a patient skill that belied his warrior's appearance. He used herbs she didn't recognize, brewing them into bitter teas that forced her to swallow. Slowly, the fever began to loosen its grip. The visions of accusing faces and burning pyres faded, replaced by the reality of the small, meticulously clean shelter he had built. One morning, she awoke with a clarity she hadn't felt in weeks. The fever was gone, leaving her weak but lucid. She looked around the small space, noting the woven mats on the floor, the neatly stacked firewood, and the small fire pit in the center. Ketua was outside, returning with a string of small fish. He saw her watching him and offered a tentative smile, his dark eyes crinkling at the corners. "You are awake," he said, his voice a deep rumble. "Good." He cleaned the fish with practiced ease, skewering them on sharpened sticks. As they roasted over the fire, he offered her water from a gourd. It tasted clean and sweet, a welcome contrast to the bitter herbs. "Thank you," she rasped, her voice hoarse from disuse. "For saving me." He shrugged, his gaze fixed on the cooking fish. "It is what anyone would do." Elara doubted that. The people of her village hadn't done it. They had left her to die. "Where am I?" "In the heart of the forest, far from your village." He spoke the word village with a slight distaste. She didn't press him. She knew what they thought of her. Witch? Plague-bringer? She turned her face away, shame burning hotter than the fever had. Ketua seemed to sense her distress. He offered her a piece of fish. "Eat. You need strength." Over the next few days, Elara slowly regained her strength. She learned to gather firewood with Ketua, to identify edible plants, and to snare small animals. He taught her the names of the trees and the birds, their uses and their songs. She marveled at his knowledge of the forest, his deep connection to the natural world. In the evenings, as the fire crackled and the stars emerged, they shared stories. Elara told him about her life in the village, about her husband, Thomas, and the small cottage they had built together. She spoke of the accusations, the fear, and the betrayal that had led to her abandonment. Ketua, in turn, told her about the Cherokee people, about their reverence for the Great Spirit, their clan system, and their deep respect for the land. He spoke of their struggles with the encroaching white settlers, their attempts to maintain their traditions in the face of relentless pressure. He described the intricate dances and ceremonies, the stories passed down through generations. Elara listened, fascinated. She had always seen the Native Americans as savage and uncivilized, as the villagers had told her. But Ketua was anything but. He was intelligent, compassionate, and deeply spiritual. She began to understand that the world was far more complex than she had ever imagined. One evening, Elara asked him about his healing skills. "How did you know which herbs to use?" He smiled. "My grandmother was a medicine woman. She taught me the ways of the plants, the secrets of healing." He pointed to a small pouch hanging from a branch. "These are some of her tools. I was on my way to trade them when I found you." "You postponed your journey for me?" Elara asked, surprised. He nodded. "Some things are more important than trade." Elara felt a warmth spread through her. She was a stranger, an outcast, yet he had risked his own plans to save her life. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a savage, but a man of profound kindness and wisdom. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why did you help me?" He looked into the flames, his face unreadable. "Perhaps," he said, "our paths were meant to cross." An unexpected proposal. The fever's retreat left Elara drained but clear-headed. What had been a chaotic maelstrom of fever dreams now sharpened into the familiar details of the small dwelling. Sunlight knifed through gaps in the log walls, striping the dirt floor in gold. The mingled scents of hearth smoke and simmering botanicals permeated the air, a comforting signature of Ketua's ever-present care. He sat nearby, patiently weaving a fishing net, each movement measured and sure. The quiet between them had shed its burden of her fear, replaced by an unspoken understanding, a calm regard forged in the crucible of her illness. He glanced up, his dark eyes revealing depths she hadn't glimpsed before. "The herbs aid," he rumbled, his voice a low resonance. "With each sunrise, your strength returns." Elara offered a wan smile. "Thanks to you, Ketua. I owe you more than I can say." He paused in his work. "No debt is incurred. I saw need and responded. It is what any should do." He set the net down, gathering his thoughts. "Yet a matter presses upon my heart, one I must voice." A nervous tremor ran through Elara. His intense gaze quickened her pulse. "Elara," he began, his tone softening, "I've observed you closely. Seen the fortitude of your spirit even as your body wrestled with the brink. I see a wellspring of kindness, a resilience that belies the trials you have endured." He rose, moving to the hearth where he stirred the embers with a branch. The flames leaped, casting dancing shadows across his features. He seemed ill at ease. This was not the unflinching warrior who'd borne her to safety. This was something far more vulnerable. "My people, we hold honesty and respect sacred. Words of the heart are not offered casually. Still, I can no longer contain them." Turning back, his gaze locked with hers, unwavering in its sincerity. "I have grown to cherish you, Elara, in ways difficult to articulate. You are unlike any I have known. I see a unique spark within you, one deserving of protection." He took a step, kneeling beside her pallet. His touch, gentle but firm, enclosed her hand. "I know you have suffered deeply. Lost your home, your kin. You stand alone." Elara's throat constricted. Tears, thoughts spent, threatened to resurface. He understood, somehow, the immensity of her loss, the aching emptiness inside her. I cannot restore what is gone, Ketua pressed on, but I offer you a haven. A new bond. A chance at rebirth. He paused, his gaze searching. I possess no riches. Only my skills, my honor, and what resides within my heart. These I offer freely, without reservation. He inhaled deeply. Elara, will you become my wife? The question hung in the air, pregnant with consequence. Elara stared, her mind a whirlwind. Marriage? To Ketua? A man woven from a different cloth, a different heritage, a world apart? Yet, in his eyes, she saw only candor, only compassion, only a sincere desire to shield and value her. He wasn't offering solace, he was offering partnership, a future forged together. Fear sparred with a nascent, unfamiliar hope. She had been exiled, condemned, left for dead. Now this man, this brave, was offering salvation not merely from death, but from a life drowned in solitude and despair. She stammered, her voice fragile. I scarcely know what to say. Speak from your soul, Ketua urged gently. No coercion exists here. Take solace in time. Reflect upon it. But Elara knew with sudden clarity that reflection wasn't needed. Her decision had already been made. What remained to lose? Her former existence was a shattered mosaic. Here lay a chance to build anew, to create something altogether different, perhaps even greater. Yes, she whispered almost imperceptibly. Yes, Ketua. I will. A slow smile bloomed across Ketua's face, illuminating his eyes and dispelling the shadows that haunted them. He squeezed her hand lightly. Regret will not find you here, Elara, he pledged, his voice resonating with quiet conviction. I will safeguard you. I will hold you in esteem. And I pledge to become the husband you merit. Releasing her hand, he rose and moved to the aperture in the wall. He gazed out at the vast, untamed wilderness, a landscape that had once seemed menacing, foreign. Now it held a different allure. It felt like a promise whispered on the wind. My people, not all will comprehend, Ketua mused, his voice introspective. Some will question my choice. But know this, I will stand steadfast by your side. Together we will face their reservations. Elara watched him, her heart aflutter with mingled apprehension and anticipation. She was stepping into uncharted territory, a world utterly unknown. But she wasn't journeying alone. She had Ketua. And perhaps, just perhaps, she had discovered a haven where she could finally belong. The sun descended, bathing the cabin in a warm glow of amber and ochre. A new dawn was breaking for Elara, a dawn tinged with uncertainty yet radiant with the potential of love, belonging, and a life beyond her wildest imaginings. Welcome to the tribe. The journey to Ketua's village felt like a passage into a dream. The forest deepened, the air grew thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the sounds shifted from the familiar chirping of birds to the rhythmic drone of insects and the distant rush of water. Elara rode behind Ketua, clinging to his broad back, the rhythmic sway of the horse a soothing counterpoint to the apprehension churning in her stomach. She was leaving behind not just a life, but a version of herself she no longer recognized. They emerged from the dense woodland into a clearing bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Elara gasped. Nestled within the embrace of rolling hills was a village of rounded dwellings crafted from wood and clay. Smoke curled lazily from the smoke holes in their roofs, and the air hummed with the activity of daily life. Children chased each other, their laughter echoing through the clearing. Women tended small gardens, their hands moving with practiced grace. Men sharpened tools, their faces etched with concentration. As they approached, the activity slowed and curious eyes turned towards them. A hush fell over the village. Ketua dismounted and helped Elara down, his hand warm and reassuring on her arm. He spoke in the Cherokee tongue, his voice strong and clear, and the villagers responded with a murmur of voices, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and cautious welcome. An elderly woman stepped forward, her face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by time and wisdom. Her eyes, though aged, were sharp and intelligent. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that commanded respect. Ketua bowed his head slightly in greeting. Hannah, he said, his voice filled with reverence. Hannah studied Elara with a long, considering gaze, then smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from her. She spoke to Ketua in Cherokee, her words flowing like a gentle stream. He replied, then turned to Elara. Hannah welcomes you. She is an elder of our tribe, a woman of great knowledge and compassion. Elara inclined her head respectfully. It is an honor to meet you, Hannah. Hannah chuckled, a low, melodious sound. You will learn our tongue, little bird. For now we speak through our hearts. She reached out and gently took Elara's hand, her touch surprisingly strong. Come. You are weary. You will eat, rest, and then we will talk. Elara followed Hannah to one of the larger dwellings. Inside, the air was cool and dim, the scent of wood smoke and herbs hanging in the air. Mats were spread on the floor, and a fire burned low in a central hearth. Other women of the tribe gathered, their faces filled with a gentle curiosity. They offered Ilara food, roasted corn, dried berries, and a savory stew that warmed her from the inside out. In the days that followed, Ilara began to immerse herself in the life of the village. She learned to grind corn, weave baskets, and identify the healing herbs that grew in the surrounding forest. The Cherokee women were patient and kind, teaching her their ways with gentle smiles and encouraging words. She struggled with the language, the unfamiliar sounds twisting her tongue, but she persevered, determined to understand and be understood. Ketua was a constant presence, guiding her, explaining the customs and traditions of his people. He taught her about the sacred connection they shared with the land, the importance of respect for all living things, and the stories of their ancestors. He showed her the ancient burial mounds that dotted the landscape, the places where the spirits of their ancestors still lingered. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Ilara watched the flames dance and flicker. "Your people. They have accepted me," she said, surprised. I feared they would resent me, an outsider." Ketua took her hand, his gaze steady. "Some were hesitant at first. But Hannah spoke for you. She saw the pain in your eyes, the goodness in your heart. And they trust her judgment." "But what about what I told you about my past?" Ketua squeezed her hand. "Your past is your past. Here, you are Ilara. You are my wife. And you are welcome." Despite his words, Ilara knew that acceptance was a fragile thing. She sensed the undercurrent of watchful eyes, the unspoken questions that lingered in the air. She was an outsider, a woman with a past shrouded in mystery and suspicion. She would have to earn their trust, prove her worth, and show them that she was not the witch they believed her to be. But as she looked into Ketua's eyes, she knew she was not alone. She had found a haven, a place where she could begin to heal and rebuild her life. And she would do everything in her power to protect it. Echoes of the past. The coughing in Havenwood had become a constant dirge, a morbid symphony that echoed through the empty streets. Each hacking breath was a stark reminder of their folly, a testament to the fear that had driven them to exile Ilara. Now, the very air seemed to carry the sickness, clinging to the clapboard houses and the parched fields. Mayor Silas, his face etched with worry lines that deepened with each passing day, convened another council meeting. The faces around the long oak table were gaunt, illuminated by the flickering candlelight. "The apothecary is gone," Silas announced, his voice heavy. "Took his last breath this morning. We're down to our last stores of willow bark." A collective groan filled the room. Willow bark tea offered only fleeting relief, a temporary shield against the relentless onslaught of fever and chills. Thomason, who had been silently observing the proceedings, finally spoke. Her voice, though quiet, held a steely resolve. "We did this to ourselves." All eyes turned to her, a mixture of confusion and resentment swirling within them. Silas frowned. "Thomason, now is not the time for blame." "Isn't it?" she countered, her gaze unwavering. "We cast out the one person who could have helped us. Ilara knew herbs, knew remedies that are now lost to us. We called her a witch, but she was only trying to heal." A murmur rippled through the council. Old Man Hemlock, the village elder, cleared his throat. "We acted out of fear, Thomason. You know that." "Fear is a powerful weapon," she replied, "but it can also be a blinding one. We let it blind us to the truth. Now our fear has manifested into this plague." She gestured weakly at the grim faces around the table. Silas sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "What are you suggesting, Thomason?" "We need to find her. We need to beg for her forgiveness and ask for her help." The silence that followed was thick and heavy, punctuated only by the incessant coughing from outside. The very notion seemed ludicrous, a desperate gambit in the face of certain death. But as the silence stretched on, a few heads began to nod in agreement. "It's our only hope," someone whispered. Silas, after a long moment of contemplation, finally nodded. "All right, we'll send a party. Thomason, you will lead them." The next morning, a small group of villagers, their faces pale but determined, gathered at the edge of the woods. Thomason, carrying a small pouch of meager supplies and a heart full of remorse, stood at the front. The rising sun cast long shadows through the trees, painting the forest in hues of gold and green. They walked for hours, following the faint tracks that Ilara and Ketua had left behind. The forest was silent, save for the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirping of a bird. Each step was a penance, a physical manifestation of their collective guilt. As they ventured deeper, they began to see signs of Ketua's people, a carefully placed marker of stones, a broken branch bent in a particular direction. It was a language they didn't understand, yet somehow Thomason felt they were being guided. Doubt nodded her. Would Ilara even listen to them? Could she ever forgive the cruelty they had inflicted upon her? The weight of their past actions settled heavily upon her shoulders. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows that danced among the trees. Just as their hope began to wane, they heard it, the faint sound of drums, a rhythmic pulse that resonated deep within their chests. They followed the sound, pushing through the dense undergrowth until they emerged into a clearing. Before them stood the village of Ketua's people, a cluster of earthen lodges bathed in the warm glow of firelight. The air was filled with the scent of wood smoke and roasting meat. Thomasin stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She saw Alara standing beside Ketua, her face etched with a mixture of surprise and wariness. The drums stopped. All eyes were upon them. The echoes of the past had finally caught up to them. A healing hand. The sight of them huddled at the edge of the clearing like lost sheep sent a shiver down Alara's spine. Thomasin, her face gaunt and etched with worry, led the small group. They knelt, their heads bowed, the picture of desperate supplication. Dust coated their threadbare clothes, and the air around them hung heavy with fear. Ketua's hand found hers, his touch a silent reassurance. He stood beside her, a stoic figure observing the scene unfold. The Cherokee warriors flanking him held their ground, watchful and wary. Alara, Thomasin croaked, her voice raspy with exhaustion. We were wrong. So terribly wrong. Please, you have to help us. Havenwood, it's dying. Alara felt a surge of conflicting emotions, vindication, anger, and a flicker of something akin to pity. These were the people who had condemned her, driven her out with stones and accusations. Yet she couldn't deny the genuine desperation in Thomasin's voice, the hollow look in her eyes. Ketua squeezed her hand gently. They have come far, Alara. Their need is great. She knew what he was implying. The Cherokee way valued compassion, extending a hand even to those who had wronged them. But could she truly offer forgiveness so easily? Could she turn her back on the pain they had inflicted? Give me time, she whispered, pulling her hand from his. I need to speak with Hannah. Elder Hannah listened patiently as Alara recounted Thomasin's plea, her words laced with bitterness and resentment. The elder woman's eyes, deep pools of wisdom, held no judgment, only understanding. The Great Spirit tests us in many ways, Alara, Hannah said softly, her voice a soothing balm. Sometimes the greatest test is to offer kindness to those who deserve it least. Havenwood suffers. Their fear led them to darkness, but darkness can be overcome with light. But they accused me, Alara protested, her voice rising. They tried to kill me. And you survived, Hannah countered, her gaze unwavering. You have found a new life, a new family. Do not let the shadows of the past cloud the present. Consider not what they did, but what you can do. The weight of Hannah's words settled upon her. It wasn't about proving them wrong or exacting revenge. It was about choosing to rise above their cruelty, about embracing the healing power that resided within her. Later, under the watchful gaze of the evening stars, Alara and Ketua worked side by side. The air was filled with the earthy fragrance of herbs and roots. Alara, drawing on her knowledge of Havenwood's flora, identified the plants that could alleviate the fever and soothe the ravaged skin. Ketua, in turn, shared the secrets of Cherokee remedies, the cooling properties of willow bark, the antiseptic power of golden seal. This root, Ketua said, holding up a gnarled piece of ginseng, will strengthen their spirits, help them find the will to fight. Alara crushed dried feverfew, its scent sharp and medicinal. And this will ease the pain, allow them to rest. They mixed and ground, stirred and simmered, their movements fluid and synchronized. A balm began to take shape, a thick, golden paste infused with the combined wisdom of two cultures. It was more than just a remedy. It was a symbol of unity, of healing, of the potential for forgiveness. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky, Alara looked at the jars of balm, her heart filled with a fragile hope. She still harbored doubts, fears that Havenwood would reject her help, would revert to their old prejudices. But she had made her decision. She would offer them a healing hand, not because they deserved it, but because it was the right thing to do. The choice had been made, and the dawn was breaking. Her village was waiting, and she would be damned if she let fear rule her actions. Bridging two worlds. The air in Havenwood, once cloying with the cloying miasma of sickness, now carried a delicate sweetness, a promise of recovery. Alara, with Ketua a steadfast shadow, moved through the village like a soothing balm personified, her fingers gently assessing foreheads as she applied the unguent. A concoction of macerated herbs and rendered fat, the recipe, gifted by Hannah, was imbued with a silent blessing for restoration. Thomasin, her face drawn and etched with worry lines, followed Alara's path, her voice raspy with gratefulness. The fever, it recedes within hours. The cough, it softens with each touch. It's a marvel, Ilara. A true blessing. Ilara offered only a nod, her concentration unbroken. She witnessed the dawning relief in weary eyes, the return of vitality to pallid skin. The curative was potent. Havenwood was on the mend. Mayor Silas, the burden of his community's survival etched into the very marrow of his bones, approached Ilara when the last patient had been seen. Ilara, he began, emotion coating his tone like honey. We are eternally in your debt. Our judgment was flawed. Terribly, unforgivably so. He swept his hand to encompass the gradually convalescing villagers. We implore you, return to Havenwood. Reclaim your place among us. We will raise a dwelling for you, grant you land. You will be revered. A low hum of assent vibrated through the small gathering. Faces previously contorted by fear and distrust now mirrored a nascent hope. Ilara met Silas's gaze, her expression an enigma. The past, the sharp sting of betrayal, lingered like a phantom limb, a dull throb in her spirit. She noted Thomason's imploring eyes, the palpable remorse etched into Silas's time-worn visage. Ketua placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, a tacit offering of support. He understood the enduring power of her past, the tangle of emotions that wrestled within her. Ilara briefly closed her eyes, drawing fortitude from Ketua's touch. The warmth emanating from his hand grounded her, a tangible reminder of the life she had built, the love she had discovered. When she reopened them, her gaze was clear and unwavering. I am grateful, Silas, for your proposition, she responded, her voice even. And I recognize your sincerity, Thomason. But my hearth is elsewhere now. A collective sigh of resignation drifted through the crowd. I cannot simply erase the chronicles of the past, nor would I wish to, Ilara continued. They have forged the person I am today. But I have embarked on a different journey, embraced a new purpose. My destiny now lies with Ketua, with his people. She turned to Ketua, her hand seeking his. Their fingers intertwined, a visible testament to their profound connection. However, she added, her gaze encompassing the faces before her, that does not equate to abandonment. The knowledge I possess, the skills I have cultivated, I will readily share them. Ketua's people are masterful healers, steeped in the wisdom of the land. We can impart our knowledge to you even as you can instruct us. We can achieve shared growth. A glimmer of comprehension sparked in Silas's eyes. We can erect a bridge connecting our disparate worlds, Ilara pursued, her voice resonant with conviction. A span built on respect, understanding, and mutual assistance. The path will be fraught with obstacles. Challenges will arise. But if we embrace a willingness to learn, to truly listen, to regard each other not as strangers but as fellow souls, then we can shape a future where both our communities can flourish. Ketua stepped forward, his very presence radiating an aura of strength and tranquility. My people extend a welcome, he stated, his voice deep and sonorous. We offer our wisdom, our friendship, our shield. However, reverence is paramount. We will not countenance prejudice or discourtesy within our territories. Silas nodded slowly, digesting Ketua's pronouncements. We comprehend, he affirmed. We are eager to learn. The ensuing weeks bore witness to their commitment. Ilara, accompanied by Ketua and several members of his tribe, spent considerable time in Havenwood disseminating their knowledge of herbal remedies, sustainable agricultural practices, and methods of peaceful conflict resolution. The villagers, in turn, instructed the tribe in their techniques of carpentry, metalworking, and meticulous record-keeping. The exchange was not devoid of difficulty. Entrenched biases proved resistant to change, and misunderstandings occurred with frequency. Yet, with Ilara and Ketua serving as mediators, they gradually began to diminish the chasm separating their cultures. Children played together, absorbing each other's games and languages. Women exchanged recipes and narratives. Men toiled side by side, constructing more robust homes and forging more resilient bonds. Havenwood was no longer the same village that had banished Ilara. It was a community slowly regenerating itself, not merely with timber and stone, but with empathy and understanding. Ilara remained with Ketua, but she made frequent sojourns to Havenwood, providing her guidance and bolstering their progress. Her heart, formerly burdened by bitterness, now harbored a fragile optimism for a future where two distinct societies could coexist in amity and accord. The frontier was transitioning from a barrier into a crossroads.